Good evening, everyone, and I'm going to begin tonight. We're going to go through questions and answers from the questions and answer book. I'm going to share the official question and answer book and right where we left off. We covered this, but I'll go over it again. What is T2A07? What is meant by repeater offset? This is so important to you in the near future when you become hams that you really need to know this well. And the answer is A, the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequency. We generally refer to a repeater's frequency as the frequency that the repeater outputs on. We set our radios up by definition to receive that frequency. And modern radios are set up so that we can set an offset, usually plus or minus, depending on the band. The differential of the offset is defined by what we use in the bands. And in that band, here we go. So I was looking for this list right here. So for the 10 meter repeaters that we have, they're not that common anymore. It's a 100 kilohertz offset. 6 meters, no true definition was ever set up. In some regions, they use a 500 kilohertz offset, a 1 megahertz offset, or a 1.7 megahertz offset. Notice that in 6 meters and 10 meters, they are all defined as negative offsets. That means, for example, in 10 meters, sorry, it's part of what's left over from COVID. That means if you're on 10 meters and you're set on the repeater frequency, the frequency you're actually going to transmit on is 100 kilohertz below the frequency you're going to receive on. On 6 meters, depending on the region, it will be 500 below, 1 megahertz below, or 1.7 megahertz below. Now, on 2 meters, almost it is universal, with some people who always have to do something different. But on 2 meters, the offset is universally plus or minus 600. The reason that it's plus or minus is because we have repeaters in 2 regions of the 2 meter band. Some are around 5 to 145 to 146 region. Generally, and some are like 147, almost to 148. If we went 600 up from 147, we'd be in trouble. So we have to, of course, make most of those negative offsets. But it's pretty well planned. There's a good band plan for 2 meters. Now on 440, well, let's get to 220, which is 1.2 5 meters. On 220, it's minus 6 megahertz, 1.6 megahertz. On 70 centimeters, it's plus or minus 5 megahertz. And everything above that, it's 12 megahertz, almost always plus. Now, modern radios will oftentimes have an automatic setting. And if you leave the automatic setting on, when you're on a frequency that's a repeater frequency, it will automatically set these for you. But if you get an older radio, you're going to have to learn to do this manually. Okay, I'm going to go back to the questions. Let's go back. That didn't help me any. Where did I go? Caca. Okay, hang on. Yeah, that's the normal way of things. I would get lost in here. Hang on, everybody. I gotta find my way back. There we go. Okay. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operation on a 2-meter band? Just about every band, we have a national calling frequency, particularly 50 megahertz and above. On 2 meters, it's 146.2. The answer A is correct. The purpose of a national calling frequency, simplex calling frequency, is if you want to work station to station direct, and believe me, you can do this over some pretty substantial differences. You want a calling frequency so that you can call CQ basically. And when you contact somebody, you move them to a nearby simplex frequency to go ahead and continue the conversation. On 440, it's 146.00. And there are calling frequencies for every band. T2A03, I've already answered this by default. What is the common repeater offset frequency for the 70 centimeter band, which is the 440 megahertz band? And it is plus or minus 5 megahertz. Yeah, that's correct. What is the appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the station's call sign? I've covered this before. The word break in amateur radio is reserved for emergencies. If you say break, break, you're saying clear the frequency. I have a life and death emergency. Remember that. Break is not a word we use except as an emergency. Please free the frequency. I've only in my lifetime heard somebody have to use break, break, and a QSO to interrupt and get the frequency. It involves somebody on a yacht at sea whose child had just swallowed some hydrochloric acid and urgently needed somebody to get through to medical facilities. Kid was with the help of hams, the kid was airlifted out, and that was about 40 years ago. Okay, the answer though is B. Say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. So if I'm calling W8XYZ, I don't know who that is, but if I were on the local repeater, I would say W8XYZ N8GIR. I might say the N8GIR calling, but all I need to say is his call and mine, or her call and mine. Now, in the real world, if you know the ham, he knows you. It's not unusual for our local repeaters where you're known and he's known and everybody's there quite often. It's not unusual to just say, "Hey, Fred, how you doing?" N-E-G-I-R. If that's the ham's name. You're not required to identify the other station. You're required to know that he's a ham. And that's why we generally say the ham's call. But obviously, if he's a ham you worked quite often, and you already know that. Why should a station respond to a station calling CQ? CQ is the only time, other than Morse code practice or some very special purposes for ham radio news, that we all can broadcast. CQ is technically a broadcast, and it means to anyone out there, I'm willing, I'm open and available, I want a QSO. You can specify your CQ. CQ, um, you can pick a part of the area you want to talk to somebody in a region. But generally speaking, CQ is an invitation, and if you would like to talk to somebody, should answer it. So, how you answer it is to say the other station's call sign and then your call sign. He will recognize you in the exact fashion, but reverse. He'll say your call sign is and begin the QSO. It's a great way to do things because you can then log down the guy's call and you won't forget because everybody said it 2 times each. Okay, we forget anyway. Which of the following requirements or is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? Let me begin by telling you generally most on-the-air test transmissions are not necessary and should be avoided. But there are times when you have to transmit the test. Can't test an antenna without transmitting, and you must identify your station. Just by giving your call sign every 10 minutes, I recommend you give it that you identify it's an on-the-air test. Give your call when you first start, and then every 10 minutes, and then the last and the end of transmission, give your call sign and let everyone know you're done with your testing. It's a good courtesy. What is meant by repeater offset? We covered this. What is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? CQ, of course, means I am calling any station. Which of the following indicates the station is listening on a repeater and looking for contacts? Generally speaking, on repeaters, people don't call CQ. The answer B is more correct than what you'll find on repeaters. A station will give his call sign and say monitoring or listening. And that's all that's necessary. Anyone that wants to talk to you will follow by, again, saying your call, their call, and start the QSO. What is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC? All band plans are voluntary guidelines for your use of different modes or activities within the amateur band. Let me explain something here. If you've ever not paid your voluntary federal income tax, because the federal income tax is a voluntary program, federal government's definition of voluntary and ours might be very different. In fact, it is. Generally speaking, once a band plan's been agreed to, you don't have to adhere to that band plan. But if you're using frequencies not adhering to the band plan and you interfere with someone who is, you are the person that must move. You are the person not operating within the band plan. So is it voluntary? Well, it's a funny definition of voluntary. And once a band plan's been established, and they've been established for just about every band and every spot in the spectrum of ham frequencies, they are kind of the de facto rules of the land. So it may be stated that they're voluntary guidelines, but they're not all that voluntary. If nobody else is using the frequency, it's not a problem. I don't know how they term it. Amateurs created band plans that help organize different modes of activities. So in other words, this portion of the band might be for CW. now the FCC has official like CW phone band plans. Those are not voluntary. But we have like sub agreements or agreements on the frequencies where just about anything can be used. Like everything above 50 megahertz, you can use for virtually any mode. We have segments set aside that we use for satellites. We have segments we set aside for simplex operations. We have segments we set aside for various purposes, TV, whatever. And we have those incorporated into the band plan. You will find band plans in your book. You can Google and find band plans for every amateur band. What is a term that describes an amateur station as transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? And that is simplex operation. A repeater operates duplex. Simplex, you transmit on a frequency and receive on a frequency. It is the most common form of ham radio communication. But it is perfectly legal to work duplex, which is transmitting on one and receiving on another. And we have partial and full duplex. Full duplex is like the telephone. You're on a frequency, the other station's on a frequency. If you have separate receivers from your transmitter, he can leave his mic on all the time. You can leave your mic on all the time. Keep the volume low or the feedback will shatter your eardrums. But you can sit there and talk back and forth to each other without ever dropping the mic because he's listening on one, you're listening on another. This does not work so well for repeaters because repeaters will time out. And when they do, the repeater will go silent for a period of time. I'll discuss that further when we get to it. What should you do before calling CQ? And in this list, they're all correct. You should listen first, see it, nobody's there. Nobody's there. That means you listen for at least a couple minutes. I like to listen for 3 or 4 minutes. Then go ahead and ask, is this frequency in use? I asked several times, is this frequency in use? NHGIR. I wait a few seconds. Is this frequency in use? NHGIR. After the third time and a couple of minutes of listening, I'm pretty sure there's nobody there. And then you make sure that you're authorized to use that frequency. Well, you should have did that before you start. You don't want to transmit somewhere you're not allowed to transmit. And so all of these are correct choices. Okay. So if, by the way, you ask and somebody says, yes, we're here, we have a QSO going here, don't get too discouraged. Yeah, you can move on and look for another place to call. But I can't even begin to describe the number of times I've asked if frequency is in use. And the guys on the frequency, I happened to catch them right in the gap. I didn't hear them in between. There was a long pause. And they say, yeah, we're here. And why don't you join us? Hams are usually very friendly and willing to let you into the QSO. If they have several hams on frequency, they'll put you into a rotation. And sometimes one guy coordinates, sometimes they'll just tell you that you go ahead and pick it up and turn it over to so-and-so to give you a guy's call. And you just join the conversation. Now, you don't have to, but it's kind of cool. Okay. How is VHF, how is a VHF UHS transceiver's reverse function used? There's on some modern radios a reverse function or button. It may be a menu setting, it may be an actual button. What it allows you to do is to listen to the repeater's input frequency. So you actually have your radio set to the repeater's output. When you hit the reverse button, it will put your receive on the offset frequency, the frequency that the repeater is listening to. I'm sorry. Yeah, is listening to. Why do you need to do that? Well, sometimes if there's some problem going on, it's a good way to hear somebody else when the repeater may not be. Um, there are a number of times when you'll find it comes in handy, but generally it's a troubleshooting tool or an assistance tool. Another reason for the repeater's offset, I did not say this, using the reverse shift. If you know you're closer to one guy and not another, and you want to tell him something you don't want the other guy to hear, if he's way out of range, if the second guy is way out of range to you, everybody's listening to the repeater's output frequency. Okay. You guys hold a conversation on the input frequency for a second. Everyone else won't hear you. I'm saying that backwards, aren't I? If you talk on the reverse frequency, no one will hear you or listen on the reverse. But that's a rare type use. I can't remember when I've ever done it, to be honest with you. What's the term that describes the use of a subaudible tone transmitted along with a normal audio tone to squelch a receiver? Now, I'm going to talk about this. In Europe, they use something called tone bursts to desquelch the repeater. And that way, in order to start a repeater transmitting your signal, at the beginning of the conversation, when you key the mic, a tone burst actually bursts an audio tone of a certain frequency. And you have heard this if you ever listen to recordings of the NASA astronauts when they went to the moon. They used tone burst to communicate with NASA control to turn on the transmitter. I'm not sure whether it's the transmitter from the craft that acts like a repeater from the state. Obviously, there's a radio in their spacesuits when they're out in the field or out of the spaceship, but there's no way that has much power. So it actually brings a repeater on of sorts in the spacecraft or space station. And then you hear a burst sound and it transmits listen to me type instructions, basically, because the receiver at NASA is set up with filters that will turn on the transmit repeat based on that burst. We do it in the US differently. We use subaudible tones. First originated by Motorola Corporation. Motorola's commercial name, trade name for it, they call it PL, which stands for private line. It's a subaudible tone, just a given frequency that you can't hear, that when you key your mic, the repeater can hear, and the repeater knows that you want to use that repeater because that repeater is set up for that tone. In that way, if you have a repeater in a nearby town that occasionally, when conditions are right, would accidentally get keyed up by a repeater in the next town, having different PLs or different CTSS tones in different regions prevents accidentally keying the wrong repeater. That is its purpose. And we do have people who use it because they don't want people in on their private quote repeaters, but that's not all that common today anymore. So when you use a repeater that has a CTCSS squelch, which is the answer, D. You have to set your encode squelch or squelch encode to that sub-audio tone. It's an actual number value, somewhere from 37 hertz to 100, I don't think it's 167 or 172 hertz, depending on which system. And for example, in Detroit, most of the repeaters use 100 hertz. So my radios have on all the repeater frequencies 100 hertz burst or 100 hertz CTSS set. The difference between tone bursts and CTSS. So tone burst is a one-time blurb that turns on the repeater, and the repeater has a timer that waits till the end of your QSO and then turns off. On CTSS, that sub-audible tone is there constantly throughout your transmission. It is not repeated by the repeater. Nobody hears it. And when you stop transmitting, that's when it stops from your signal. All right, let's continue on, everybody. I didn't realize I was muted. And I will share screen again, and we'll continue. Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? The answer is A repeater network of repeaters in which signals received by one repeater are transmitted by all of the repeaters in the network. We link repeaters various ways. One way is through auxiliary link frequencies over the air. For example, we could have a 2-meter repeater linked through 440 links or 1.2 gig links or 900 megahertz links or whatever we wanted, linked to another repeater to expand the area coverage. We can also link repeaters today via the internet so that multiple repeaters all function as if it's when you're on one, you're on them all. Here in the Detroit area, I work with a group that has repeaters linked all the way from Sandusky, Ohio, along the east side of the state of Michigan, all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So when I'm driving down the road, I might be talking to somebody 500 miles away. And they're talking to their local repeater, and I'm talking to my local repeater. It's cool technology, and it's going to get more, and there's going to be better. There's going to be more of that. So, that's to answer the question. A network of repeaters which the signals received by one are transmitted by all. So in such, they act like one larger area repeater than they really are. It's really kind of cool to drive in your car and talk to somebody on another side of a state via repeater. And in some parts of the country, it can be several states over. It's really getting quite advanced. I can see a day when we have a national repeater frequency where the repeaters all on that, they won't be on the same frequency, but we have a national repeater network where all the repeaters on that network will be tied from coast to coast. It's very possible that will come along. It's done a lot in digital mode because digital allows for internet linking. Which of the following could be the reason you're unable to access a repeater whose output you can hear? Well, all of these are reasons. Number one, you could have improper offset for that repeater set. Check that, correct it, you'll be in business. If you're using the wrong CTSS code, that could be it. And if it's digitally wrong, using the wrong DCS code, the digital code for digital repeaters, some digital repeaters, you got to set all those things right. In other words, you will not have both B and C. It will be one or the other. TCSS is predominantly used for analog FM repeaters. DCS codes are set for digital repeaters. Okay. Digital code squelch, I think, is what it stands for. So I'm almost positive, but I'm getting old. What can I tell you about that? What would cause your FM transmission audio to be distorted on the voice peaks? Well, more than likely you're talking too loud. Your microphone's set a little too loud, but it's more than likely you're talking too loud and you're overdriving an FM transmitter. When you overmodulate an FM signal, the FM deviation, and I'm going to talk about what that is right now. I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to draw a fancy picture in a second. FM deviation is a word I want you to become very familiar with. It will come in handy many times in your ham radio background. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to share a drawing program and we're going to draw this out, just you and me, and nobody else needs to know all about this but us. I'm kidding, of course. Share screen. Let's go to paint. When we transmit on FM, we change the frequency that we're on to match the audio of our voice. Now we limit it. We can't do it infinitely. We can't do it just infinitely any which way but loose type of thing. That's a little thick of a line. Okay. And I'm going to come over here, steal an eraser. Don't need all this line. Don't need all this line. And I'm going to draw one more fancy line that's going to answer all the problems of figuring this out. Oops. That didn't do it. I used to be better at this. There we go. It's good enough. Our FM signal has to fit in a certain area. The whole thing, as we talk, has to fit in this area. Now, that's usually about 1.5 megs. I'm sorry. 351. It's about 600 kilohertz. Okay, roughly. It can be as high as 15 kilohertz in FM. Okay. It's all got to fit in there. That's all we're listening to. If our signal is so loud that the frequency is shifting outside of that range, and I've kind of drawn this weird, it really shouldn't be a arc like that. Should just like fill in this area. But if we're outside of that range, it's going to get clipped off. And because it gets clipped off, we won't hear it right. Let's talk about what's happening with the transistor. that's handling this. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of these drawings here. The transistor that's handling that can handle a certain, it can handle a certain wave length. No problem. But unfortunately, it can't handle every wavelength, every frequency. It can handle this frequency for now. Well, let me undo that. Let me just redraw this. We might have it set that it could handle this, could handle maybe some of this, but it's got a range of which it can handle. When you're outside of what it can handle, all it can do is give you what it's got, and the rest, the stuff that's out of bounds here, stuff on this side gets clipped off, and the stuff at this side gets just turned into a flat line. It's just the maximum it can do. It can't continue the arc any further because that's its limit that the transistor can handle. And our transistor circuits have been set to handle limits we need. So the receiver can flat top. More importantly, the transmitter's frequency, we call this flat topping. The wave have reached a point where it's at its maximum and it's just going to flat top off. And to kind of better illustrate this, imagine we're dealing with a wave like this, okay? And now our wave gets too high. It's at the highest point the transistor can handle. It can't go anymore. So that signal becomes distorted. And we refer to this as flat topping. The transistor has reached its maximum electronically. We've tried to push beyond its limits. Now, so we've got two conditions that occurs from overmodulation. And the part I want to get back to is that we have a range. We have a range right in here. This is the maximum that the receiver can hear. Okay? That's the range. We can't go any more than this line in, oops, I'm a little off of it. Can't go past it. The receiver can't hear it, and the transmitter will flat top. It won't send it out clearly. So if we have a transmitter set for a wider bandwidth or FM deviation, even if the transmitter transistor can handle it, the receiver would clip it off. More than likely, if we over deviate, this is the standard deviation or deviation of the FM signal. As you talk, your frequency is moving back and forth between this zone and FM. It is frequency modulation. So the center frequency is the frequency you've tuned on, but depending on the information that is being reproduced by your voice in the originally from your voice, there's a limit to what we can get. Now, broadcast FM is very, very wide, can handle full fidelity audio, but we don't have full fidelity audio. We have 15 kilohertz maximum. And if we go beyond it, just even a hertz, it'll be distorted. So the way we avoid this is by not overdriving the audio. If you're talking too loud, back off from the microphone, lower your voice, or a lot of radios have adjustments for setting the FM mic sensitivity. So likewise, if you set your receiver, we hams use wideband FM, not commercial broadcast FM, but we use wideband FM. And many services like GMR and commercial services use a much narrower, less fidelity audio than we use. You can't understand them with your radio because you're unless you change the uh deviation, receiver deviation in your radio. Some of our radios can be adjusted to narrow FM, but we hams generally don't use it for our own bands. So now, interestingly, if you take an FM radio on the ham bands, you can tune it to the audio of FM TV stations in the 400 megahertz band because TV doesn't actually fully reproduce audio. Theirs is just a little bit wider than what we use. So you can listen to it. And of course, some like Baofengs will let you to, they actually have a wide broadcast wide FM receiver. So you can listen to FM broadcast stations on, you can listen only. What type of signaling uses pairs of audio tone? Now, this is a little different than all the others. Not as commonly used today as it once was, but still in use. We use DTMF codes, audio codes. Those are the digital touch tone codes of the phone system. When you dial a phone line, it sends off two, when you're dialing the numbers, it sends off two tones simultaneously. It's a dual tone audio system, and the dual tone they call it multi-frequency tones, is what you use to dial phone numbers. We use them on touchtone pads, on repeater, or not repeaters. Well, sometimes on repeaters, on radio microphones, and sometimes handheld mics. We can generate on some radios those tones to use to control things like a repeater and to access various functions to turn things on and off remotely on a repeater. So one of them we used to use them a lot for is a lot of repeaters used to have phone patches. Used to drive along in your car, use the touchtone code to get to the phone line, dial a phone number from your car, and let your wife tell you on the way home from work that you're supposed to pick up a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and a bottle of milk before you come home. We used to jokingly refer to that to the milk, egg, and bread calls. And it almost was a routine for some hams back in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. Cell phone has kind of made that a thing of the past. It's far more convenient to use your cell phone. What can you join a digital repeater, or how can you join a digital repeaters talk group? And in the talk groups are subgroups on digital repeaters, so that it kind of like allows you to network together as a group, and you program your radio with the group's ID or code. And after you do that, the radio, when it transmits, will transmit that code in the background digitally. And depending on the mode, the type of radio, That kind of limits the conversation to guys or gals in that group. So it's necessary in DMR to always use a talk group, but generally speaking, the talk groups are pretty much nowadays open to everybody. So it's not a mystery and it's not a private thing. It could be though. Which of the following applies to two stations transmitting on the same frequency, interfering with each other? Well, first of all, the answer they're looking for here is the station should negotiate continued use of the frequency. In other words, you guys, if you get on a frequency and you find it, you're interfering with another station, you got to work it out between you. Remember, we'll repeat this over and over and over again. An amateur radio station may never intentionally interfere with any other radio station, ever. Legit or not, you may not intentionally interfere. Interfering with another station, regardless of why they're there or who they are, is against the law, and using your radio to break the law is breaking the law. But we accidentally can interfere and accidentally do, and the thing we do is negotiate it out. We say, hey, go ahead, take the frequency. We'll move our conversation somewhere else. Or more often than not, when hams find that somebody else is on the frequency they were using, oftentimes they share it and we just work all of us all together. So it says in the comment below, if transmission seriously degrades or obstructs or repeatedly interrupts the communication of a regulated service, that's considered harmful interference. Common courtesy should prevail, but remember that no one has an absolute right to the frequency. An exception I'm going to throw in here is that a coordinated service, like a repeater that's coordinated and according with a band plan and the coordination repeater coordinating committee of the area, it always has preference over anybody operating independently. So if you want to work somebody simplex on a repeater frequency, you can get away with it if nobody else is on. It's a problem if you try to do it on the repeater's input frequency. If you do it on the repeater's output frequency, it might not harm anybody. But if somebody wants to use a repeater, you need to get out of their way because they're on a coordinated frequency and you're not. This simple solution there is to go to a simplex frequency and you won't have that problem. Sometimes, though, for real short communications, I got to get something real quick to somebody. I just say go to the repeater's output frequency and let's chat there for 1 second. Because the repeater is not listening to that frequency. And if nobody's using a repeater, it's not a problem. I can guarantee you, with most repeaters, unless you're way far away from a repeater, if you're using their frequency, their output frequency, somebody does key up the repeater, they're going to wipe you out anyways. So why are simplex channels designated in the UHF and VHF band plans? It's so stations can talk to each other direct without tying up a repeater. There's no reason for me sitting in my station with an antenna 50 foot in the air, a beam pointed at my friend across town, whose beam is pointing at me, to go through a repeater when we can point our beams directly at each other or just through verticals. And we can talk directly from my station to his station. Repeaters were really designed to extend the range of mobile communications. So using them for fixed stations is not illegal, but why tie up the repeater? Number one. Number two, if you're using a repeater, everybody on the repeater is listening to you. If you're using a simplex frequency, the only people listening to you is somebody who stumbled into it. I guarantee you, in your ham radio career, you will one day accidentally say something seriously or kidding or whatever, and every single ham in the area will know you said it because you said it on a repeater. All right. Which cue signal indicates that you are receiving interference from another station? I'm going to answer this easy for you. Cue signals are signals that we use originally from Morse code to quickly abbreviate our conversation. They are the only codes you really can use in amateur radio, with the exception of there's a set of international abbreviations for certain words that are internationally accepted. You can't, for example, use things like the 10 codes because they're not internationally recognized and they're not universal internationally, but the Q codes are. There are two Q codes for interference, QRM and QRN. Okay. QRM is man-made interference. That's why the M. QRN is nature or natural created interference. So the answer to this is QRM. The Q codes are given to you in your book. There's some examples here I'm going to go through. You will use QRM, QRN in your conversations on the air. You will probably rarely use, but you might use QRL. Are you busy? Or in Morse code, it makes a lot of sense, but in everyday conversation, we don't use them a lot. We will use QRO, QRP, which is increase or decrease power occasionally. You never will in voice say QRQ because it's send your Morse code faster or slower. So you won't say QRS. And you might say I'm going QRT, which means I'm going off the air. Okay. You won't use a lot of the others except maybe QR. Well, let's go through. You might use QRZ. If you're calling CQ and you didn't hear the guy's call, you might say QRZ, the station calling me. You might acknowledge somebody's statement by saying QSL, which is Roger in amateur radio talk. We always refer to our conversations as QSOs. Okay. And we use QTH, which is our location. We will often in voice say QSY and give a frequency to tell somebody, let's go to a different frequency. Generally, you won't use the rest unless you're operating Morse code. The original purpose of the Q codes was to limit the number of characters we had to send to hold a conversation in Morse code. There's a set of abbreviations of words that go with it. They're amateur, international, recognized abbreviations. Again, they're predominantly used just for Morse code. So this is a carryover from Morse code that we use some particles of, but we don't use it all. Okay. Which Q signals indicates that you are changing frequency? QSY. Answer is B. That one we use a lot. What is the purpose of the color code used on a DMR repeater system? Well, This is falling out of favor as I speak. I imagine in a number of years it's going to go away. But I talked about the digital codes for digital repeaters, and the digital codes are called color codes, and they permit access to the digital repeater just like CTCSS permits access to an analog repeater. If anyone doesn't know the difference, digital repeaters, digital radio, the audio is digitized and transmitted as a series of on and off characters, which are then reconstructed in the receiver and reconstituted back into audio. Analog FM repeaters take the audio, they mix it with the fundamental frequency, and they shift the frequency up and down in the spectrum. That's why it's FM modulation. And so it is conventional radio. Digital is digitized radio. On a standard analog radio, digital will sound like blurps. And you don't hear standard analog on a digital radio as a rule either. They are not mutually compatible. So if you hear a repeater frequency and you hear something that sounds alien, it's probably digital. If you're on digital and you can't understand something, if the radio can switch to analog, switch to analog. And understand that there are now different protocols of digital. They are not universally compatible. But you'll find out what's most prevalent in your area. And a lot of people pick one that's most prevalent in their area and stick with the digital. A lot of hams stick with analog. And there are advantages to all of them. I will begin by telling you that analog signals can be decoded when there's barely a signal there. Digital signals will start to sound like you're underwater and then eventually become totally unrecognizable if there aren't enough bits coming to the receiver to decode. So there's generally a little better range on an analog signal. But the reproduction of the audio in some of the digital systems is unbelievable. Some of them sound like the ham you're talking to is sitting right next to you. Way better audio than the FM. What is the purpose of a squelch function? Well, we turn on squelch in our radios to mute the background noise. So when nobody's talking, it's silent. When we get a signal, it breaks the squelch, and we hear the people talking. So squelch allows us not to listen to static. Simple as that. And the answer is B, to mute the receiver audio when there's no signal present, when a signal's not present. So I'm going to go back to the book now. We're going to finish out some of the questions and answers. And I hope you guys found that kind of interesting. All right. So T2C01. This is public service and emergency communications, RACES and ARES. When do the FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur radio station? True answer to this is never. The FCC rules always apply. Answer D. There's no such thing as an emergency means we can break the rules. There is no reason where we can't use the rules of the FCC because it accommodates everything an emergency could require. Priority traffic on the air is emergency traffic. If you identify as being emergency or having emergency traffic, everyone else is supposed to get out of your way. So there would never be a time you should ever need to, nor is it ever, there's no exceptions for it. Which of the following are typical duties of a net control operator? I'm going to stop there and tell you what a net control operator is. When we run networks, there are groups of people on the air simultaneously at the same time for specific purposes. Sometimes just to communicate as a group and share common interests. Sometimes to handle traffic and sometimes for emergency purposes. We even have networks for things like Skywarn for looking for tornado or roll clouds. And we have them for things like testing the emergency sirens. We volunteer hams test the emergency sirens in that area. And so, yeah, the answer is C. How did that happen? Somebody draw that? I didn't do it, but I don't know how to do it. So, net control operators run the net, generally in a very formal fashion. They will open the net by announcing a preamble or reading a preamble to the net, identifying what the net is, its basic function. They will ask for check-ins. At that point, amateur radio stations that wish to join the net may give their call, and when the net control gives them airspace, gives them time on the air, then and only then they actually transmit. Generally speaking, most nets will ask if there's any emergency traffic first, regardless of what the net is for, because nets are supplemental, even if they're just common interest net. Now, there are nets like quilting nets or knitting nets or photography nets that talk about the latest in those hobbies that go along with their ham radio hobby. There are even cooking nets, but most nets are willing to entertain or carry any emergency communications before anything else that they do. And most net control operators already have a system so that if they get emergency traffic, they know how to forward it to emergency nets. Okay. So the answer to this is yes, C. A net will call to order communications between stations and ask for check-ins. Mike, do you have a question? Okay. What techniques is used to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly? Well, if you're using an unusual word in a message, we spell them out phonetically. If there's any reason the word might be confused and it's important, we spell it out phonetically. How did I get all these red lines? Anyway.
That was my fault. I got stuck in the edit mode and I was trying to get it to go away. I think I can go back and erase them.
Don't worry about it.
I'm sorry.
What is races? Bet Tom knows what races is. Races is part of the FCC Part 97 amateur radio service for civil defense communications during emergencies. RACES is the official FCC emergency group. So D is the correct answer. RACES is FCC, part of the FCC radio service. RACES is established by the federal government. ARES is established by local hams. It's the difference. What does the term traffic refer to in a net operation? Traffic, the word traffic refers to messages that are going to be exchanged on a net. Formal traffic and informal traffic are different. Formal traffic, well, let's start with informal. Informal traffic are just messages between hams, and there's nothing formal about it. Formal traffic is traffic that is organized, is sent as what we call a radiogram. There's actually a format to it. It's in your book. You'll see a copy of it. When we get to it in the book, we'll discuss it. Formal traffic is handled in very specific ways. When I get to that, I'll cover it in more detail. What is the amateur radio emergency service? And that is C. It's a training program, and yes, but it's in down at the bottom. The answer there is better defined. Races consist of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. They're people who volunteer to help in a case of emergency. They help groups like the Red Cross and various other organizations when they're needed. But they're driven, or their source is from the ham radio community, not from the federal government. Doesn't make us, as RACES operators, more or less of anything than ARES operators versus RACES. Generally speaking, we transition both. But understand that one was driven by the federal government, the other was driven by hams themselves. Which of the following is a standard practice when you participate in that? Okay, the answer they're looking for here is C. Unless you're reporting an emergency, only transmit when directed by net control. Let's talk about traffic. And traffics have separate priorities. Traffic is defined as either being emergency, health and welfare, or routine. Routine traffic is what you and me are talk on the radio to each other every day. Hey, how you doing, Jeff? Nice to see you today. I might say happy birthday to you, Jeff. That's the routine traffic. It's also priority traffic. I forgot that one. I'll start at the top. Emergency traffic takes precedence over anything. If you have emergency traffic and you want to check into a net to have it forwarded to where it needs to go, you immediately tell net control, this is NHEIR, I have emergency traffic. He will immediately, or she will immediately take you right away. Because emergency traffic means it's a life and death situation where either physical harm to a human being, medical assistance, or the possibility of loss of property or life is involved. It is immediate. So we take that as the most serious and highest priority communications. Everyone else is expected by law to sit on the sideline until that traffic is handled. The next level of traffic I get them mixed up, but I think the next one is priority traffic. Priority traffic is traffic for an official use. It's not life and death. But if there was a hurricane in Florida and you've got traffic to facilitate getting sandbags down to an area where they need sandbags, that's a priority. It might not be immediate life and death, but it's priority. Priority traffic is to facilitate the needs of an emergency. Maybe not immediate life and death, but getting water, getting food, getting supplies, helping with that over the air for during an emergency is priority. It is, again, over and above all the rest of our traffic. Next in line is health and welfare. Emergency has happened, let's say an earthquake. There was just one the other day in Afghanistan, a 6.9 earthquake. We wouldn't be handling this here, but in Afghanistan, I'm sure right now there's a lot of health and welfare traffic going on. So health and welfare is, hey, Jeff, you're a ham. Can you check to see if my cousin Louise is okay down in Louisiana after a flood? If you can get a hold of another ham in the area and find out, that's or send a message to the area asking if anybody would check on your cousin Louise, that is health and welfare traffic, and it is next in priority. Now, routine everyday traffic is the lowest in priority, and our normal ham radio QSOs are a form of routine traffic. Traffic being messages on the air. Does that make a lot of sense to everybody? All right. I don't think I'm going to go too much farther. Which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling? Good traffic handling means that you've sent the message exactly as it was received. Formal traffic has a checksum to verify the number of characters and words, depending on the mode. Formal traffic has a body, a destination, the time and date, all the information critical, including the source of the original message. And formal traffic is expected to be passed with letter to letter precision. Hams do a pretty good job of it. So the answer here is A. Good traffic handling involves passing a message exactly as it was received. I'm going to go one more question and then we're going to call it for the day. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate the frequency privileges are outside of the frequency privileges of their class? And this is something that I want you guys to know precisely so you don't end up in trouble. The answer is yes, but only when it's truly emergency traffic. Now, you are not authorized to operate on frequencies outside of the ham band. There is an exception in Part 97 that says you can use any frequency in an actual emergency. But Part 97 only covers the ham bands and ham radio operators. So it doesn't mean you can grab the local police frequency or the local fire frequency or whatever frequency to tell somebody, hey, I have an emergency. It means you can, even if you're a technician, use any ham frequency to get any other ham to get the message through for you. It's an emergency. But remember what emergency traffic must be. It must involve the immediate risk to life or property. And for this exception to take place, no other mode of communication must be available. In today's society, lacking a nuclear strike, it's not very likely that you don't have a cell phone or something else And it's probably a better source for a true emergency to get a quicker response. Because on a cell phone, you can call the police up directly or EMS directly.